get that get back for you. He gonna do it. You don't even gotta worry about it. I know it hurt. I know that they did you wrong. But leave it alone. God saw the whole thing from start to finish. Every lie, every betrayal. You don't have to chase justice when God already knows the truth. You don't have to do it. While they're busy thinking that they got away with it, God is busy working it out for you. Your job is just to heal. God gonna handle the rest.
Hello, my darling Fumi Nation. How are you? How are we? Last week, Friday, I was cleaning up the kitchen. It was around 9 p.m. in the evening. And my wonderful friend Michael sent me a text. And I opened it and I screamed. Jason Arday had passed away via suicide. A week, 2 weeks prior to this, I knew that he had been in the news for plagiarism. Jason Arday was the youngest black professor to come out of Cambridge. He was made a professor in 2023. I was so very proud of him because he was an autistic man who had really plowed through so many challenges. And so when this news came out, I refused to cover it. I don't like covering negative stories about my black community. There I said it. Unless I have to. It has now finally come out that in actual fact, he did not plagiarize anything at all. But we have people in this world who are racist, who don't do their research, who would rather follow a story because it's trending, and who don't care that this person actually be a human being. And Jason Arday was a human being. He was a kind human being, very caring with a very soft voice. And not only was he a professor, he was a father of 2 beautiful children, as well as a husband. The following day, I was working. I was modeling at a fashion show, so I couldn't cover it. And then the weekend was just juxtaposed with so many things. I decided to give this some time and wait until after the vigil that they had at Trafalgar Square before I would come and cover this. He was driven to suicide, and I am so frustrated. I am so sad. I am so sad that he did this, and yet I am not surprised because of how the press hounded him with over 200 articles in a matter of just 3 weeks. He ended up resigning from Cambridge, and yet it was not enough. This is what they did to Princess Diana until she passed away, and this is what they did to Meghan Markle until her husband, Diana's son, Prince Harry, said, "My wife might not make it." And she had declared and said that she was suicidal. And yet Piers Morgan continued to hound her down. She was lucky she got out. I think of the Telegraph. Yes, I'm going to call you out. And I think of so many other publications that hounded Jason just because you could. The irony of it all is you have disabled all of your comment sections. And yet the Telegraph and all of these websites and all of these YouTube channels, you come as a collective, and yet you disable the comment section because you cannot handle it. And yet you badgered this man until he decided to take his life. Because in those days, in those hours, he said, let me go so that I can protect my family. And even when he passed away, you were still hounding him and his family outside of his home. The body was not even taken to the morgue yet, and you were already outside his home, pressing to speak to the wife, to take pictures of the children. Of course, shame on you. Of course, shame on all of you. Some have said we were so touched with all of the people that showed up at Trafalgar Square. If only we had done this when he was alive. People have lives. People have deadlines. People have jobs. People have to run and pick up their children. People have their own problems. But that does not mean that we did not love Jason any less. And we have seen how vicious the press can be. There is one man that comes to mind, and he was fired. That's the irony of it all. He was fired himself from Cambridge. Nathan Koffners was what set this off. A lot of us are under the impression that this happened 3 weeks ago. No, this has been going on for the past 3 years. That is why Jason was so exhausted towards the very end.
And he said, I love you. But he said, they're hounding me to death. And I cannot see a way out.
You know, watching so many people gather to pay their respects to Jason Arday is very touching. Having the physical representation of people really in person, showing by the count of their bodies that he meant not only something to all of us, but that we absolutely stand against the manner in which he was witch hunted, he was torn down, he was made to feel less. I think that is important. However, let me not lie, I think this is a time of reflection for all of us. Because, you know, you have to ask, where were we all these last 2 weeks? Where were we all last 3 weeks? Now, some of us were not aware of what was happening until we were hit with a tsunami of think pieces and TV interviews, all about one man that many people had not heard of. And people started to question, I'm sorry, what exactly did he do wrong? But that question didn't come up until it was too late. What exactly did he do wrong? And the fact that people were more focused on lynching him, on disassociating themselves from him because he was not the perfect victim. And I say this from personal experience. There's a time for holding people accountable, and there's a time to save people from public lynchings that they do not deserve. Nothing he did deserve that. Absolutely nothing he did deserve that. I just felt like people were more focused on making an example of him. And I have to ask, where were we all? Did we not see that writing on the wall? And when we did, what did we do? What did we do? I just think that this has to be a time of reflection. I just think that for many of us, especially in the Black community, and for those who say that we are actively anti-racist, I really call on us to be louder than racist. When things like this happen, which they will, we need to be able to say that we, as Black people, we have the right to make mistakes. We have the right to be deeply flawed. We have the right, quite frankly, to be human. We didn't give Jason that grace. I'm just saying that collectively, as a society, collectively, as people who have a common cause to fight racism, we didn't speak up. We weren't asking the questions. When they came out saying he did this, we should have been louder. And we should have said, so what if he did? And how does that justify a tsunami of hate? So what if he did? So what? We should have been louder. Instead, we were playing the game of white supremacy. We were feeding into their own rules, trying to play by the rules that they break all of the time. Have you not seen how, ferociously they defend their own? And ferociously they do not care when their own break the rules, when they lie, when they steal, when they corrupt, when they commit crimes. What the hell did we allow them to hang him out to dry? Now it pains me. It pains me. Let me make it clear. There will be other Jason Ardays. Hell, there are Jason Ardays now. There are Jason Ardays now. And I say that from personal experience. There are people like me who are embroiled in public backlashes, public lynchings, all the freaking time. And I don't necessarily get, I don't necessarily get public support that's commensurate to the public smear and hate. Learned a long time ago not to rely on people, which is why it always touches me when I receive any act of kindness. I'm always very grateful to God who holds me strong, always. I'm just saying, look, people, we need to do better. We need to be better.
For those of you that are asking, Fumi, in layman's terms, exactly what happened, well, here you go.
Anyone who doesn't know, here are the plain facts about the events leading up to Jason Arday's death. 2023, an academic, David Harris, raises questions about the authenticity of some of Arday's work. 2025, Jack Grove at Times Higher Education pursues his own investigation, comes up with a 63-page dossier. However, Jason Arday's lawyers intervene and he reluctantly drops the investigation. 2025-6, Liverpool John Moores University conduct their own investigation confidentially into accusations that Arday's PhD was plagiarized, and they conclude that his PhD still stands. Here's the key point. July 2026, 3 years after Jack Grove at Times Higher Education, Nathan Kofinas, who is a known racist, believes that black people are less intelligent, it's all out there on the internet, publishes a long report on Substack, going after Arday in every way possible, including his personal claims. Now, as a result, late July, early August, Times, Telegraph, Guardian, 189 articles in 8 days. It's a witch hunt. It's bloodthirsty. It's overkill. Unlike what Jack Grove may have been trying to do, there is absolutely no way this can be in the public interest. It's pure malice and cruelty, and it's motivated by Nathan Kofinas' actions. After that, Cambridge opened their own investigation. Arday resigns and then later dies. Those are the plain facts. The key point is that a known racist intervened and caused an unnecessary and malicious and vindictive press campaign.
Now, Arday was special. The reason Arday is getting a lot of attention is he took the plagiarism, which is fairly common in academia, too far. And he told these crazy lies about his personal life. And he had such an exalted position that the mismatch between the quality and the prestige was so enormous that there was a hook for a story. That was what was special about him. Not that he's a fraud, not that he's a worthless scholar. It's that there was a story. There was a basis for a news story that would capture people's attention. But, there are so many cases of people who are just like Arday, but, there isn't that kind of story potential. Maybe the lesson is this: what's happened if you don't give Kofinas a job, right?
Yeah, you got your own ways to retaliate. What are you going to do, do you think? You going to finish your PhD? Or no, you've already finished it. You're just going to...
No, I finished a long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, so what are you going to do?
I have the job currently, and I'm still waiting for the revolution to happen, and then
it's going to take a while.
Get another job. After the revolution, I'll be the head of the Department of Eugenics and Race Science at Harvard. Maybe.
This is a story of corruption, of people who knew the truth and covered it up. Look, there are pages and pages of verbatim copied text. That's not, there's no norm in academia according to which this is remotely acceptable. And even if you ignored the plagiarism, there's still a scandal here, because the work that isn't plagiarized is of such abysmal quality that it really raises questions about why he was hired and protected up to this point. This is a story of corruption, of people who knew the truth and covered it up, who used the threat of legal intimidation to silence people, including journalists who tried to tell the truth. To this day, as far as I'm aware, there isn't a single member of the Cambridge faculty who has spoken publicly about the wrongdoing in this situation, because the administration has created such an environment of intimidation that people can't express views that go against their ideology.
I mean, Jason Arday did say that he felt he was being harassed.
I mean, if you do something wrong repeatedly and knowingly, and people ask you questions about it, I mean, you can't just get off scot-free by calling it harassment. And also, as to Arday playing the victim, he is, okay, he's not smart like a professor, a Cambridge professor, but he knows what he's doing, in my view, because if you look at who he plagiarizes, it's always people with very little institutional power.
Joe Biden, who had 5 pages in his 15-page article at law school, entirely plagiarized verbatim, and used to copy Neil Kinnock's speeches. But yeah, he went on to become President of the United States. Nobody cared if he wore orange trousers or ran a marathon. The hounding by the media has been disproportionate and unprecedented. None of this has anything to do with the accusations. It has to do with the media and some incredibly jealous, failed academics like Nathan Kofkas, who are hell-bent on destroying brilliance merely because of the colour of someone's skin.
A modern day public lynching. Okay, so if you didn't know, Jason Arday, a former Cambridge University professor who recently resigned over a plagiarism scandal, was found dead at the age of 41. Jason became the youngest black professor ever to be appointed at Cambridge University. Then some plagiarism allegations came about, right? And bear in mind, the university that awarded him the PhDs, John Moores University, Liverpool, actually cleared him of any wrongdoing. And it was this man, Nathan Kofkas, who basically started this campaign or alleged that he plagiarized, right? Bear in mind, this is the same man that apparently said the following. He called himself a race realist, and he argued that under true meritocracy, black people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sport and entertainment. This man is the man that started the allegations. Anyway, so Cambridge had started investigating it. Fair play, do you think? Jason had also then just resigned from his position. What led from that was 249 articles in 22 days. That doesn't even include like news channels or social media or LBC on the hour every hour about a university professor and alleged academic misconduct. Bear in mind, all these articles then started on him as a person, his personal life, his career, his charity work, his marathon running, his childhood. Journalists were contacting people that went to school with him to really investigate whether he really was non-verbal at the age of 11.
Yes.
At some point it stopped being did Jason plagiarize and turned into can we prove that this black man's entire existence is fraudulent. Reality is we have to talk about racism here, right? Because racism isn't just always someone shouting a slur at you. Sometimes it's about disproportionality. Who gets investigated, how they get investigated, and we're satisfied with how much they've been punished. Because the thing is, he resigned, so he left the position, so move on. Simon Goldhill was also a university professor, and he was done for sexual misconduct. He resigned, it was reported, people moved on. There wasn't 249 articles. Dr. O'Reilly, who was done for plagiarising his students' work, didn't get the same amount of media coverage. No one rang his childhood to find out what he did when he was a kid. The amount of politicians and people in power that are doing corrupt things, people that we elect, people that have a direct impact on our daily lives, and they don't get the same amount of media scrutiny. The reality is, the media will always cover the wrongdoings of a black person or a person of colour, because then they can prove that this is why you don't belong in our spaces. Young black autistic man being the professor at Cambridge University, that's not your space, love. And you mess up once and we are going to make sure that we destroy you. We're going to use you as an example, so then everyone that comes after you knows exactly where they stand. Just look how a black autistic man's entire life was put on trial, and ask me again whether race played a part. Because if you only recognise racism when someone shouts a slur, you're going to miss a whole lot of racism. Sometimes you don't need a slur. Sometimes all you need is a microscope that only seems to magnify certain people.
Autism and suicide. We need to talk about this.
Hi, I'm Professor Ahmed Hankir, consultant psychiatrist. There is something we urgently need to talk. Research from Professor Sir Simon Baron-Cohen and colleagues at Cambridge found extraordinarily high rates of suicidality among autistic adults. In their landmark study, 2/3 had experienced suicidal thoughts, and more than 1 in 3 had planned or attempted suicide. More research evidence suggests that around 1 in 4 autistic people may attempt suicide during their lifetime. Think about that. Autism itself does not mean somebody is suicidal, but autistic people can face additional vulnerability, mental health difficulties, isolation, discrimination, bullying and harassment, rejection, and the enormous exhaustion of trying to function in a world that often doesn't accommodate neurodivergence. Then imagine adding relentless online harassment, public humiliation, or sustained media scrutiny. Many people are already fighting battles that nobody else can see. Someone can appear successful, productive, and high-functioning on the outside, while experiencing unbearable distress internally. And that brings me to Professor Jason Arday. Jason spoke openly about being autistic and about his mental health. Before his death, he had also been subjected to extraordinary levels of media and social media scrutiny. We do not know yet how Jason Arday died. I want to make that absolutely clear. I will not speculate about suicide when the cause of his death has not been established. But his death should make us ask difficult questions. When we know that somebody may already be vulnerable, where is the duty of care? Where does legitimate scrutiny end and harassment begin? And what accountability exists when media coverage or online behavior becomes relentless and dehumanizing? We also cannot ignore the wider context of race, neurodiversity, and the culture wars that surrounded Jason. Whatever eventually emerges about the circumstances of his death, there is a much bigger lesson here. We need to stop waiting until somebody tragically dies before we start asking whether they were adequately supported. Accountability matters, but humanity matters too.
I played the last clip because I have just found out that I am neurodivergent and I'm also ADHD. I'm an advocate for both boys and girls that are on the spectrum. And looking back now at my life, especially when I was younger, it explains so many things that I didn't understand, and I felt different all the time. This hit home, and it took some time for me to digest. Some of you might not know, but about 3 months ago, I was being attacked online. I didn't say a word. I didn't bring any attention to it, but it affected me, and I lost 10 pounds. A lot of you asked me, Fumi, are you okay? You've lost so much weight. And yet I was here every day to do my job. I took care of my son, of my home. I took him to school. I picked him up from school. And I was going through a very, very difficult time. Might I say the entire 12 years of me being content creator, this year has been the absolute hardest. And so I say to myself, I can only imagine to have over 250 outlets attacking you. Of course, you will feel suicidal. Meghan Markle said it, she was able to escape. That was not the same for Jason Arday. May your beautiful soul rest in peace. Bullying is never the way. And this online assassination, just because you're chasing a story, is unethical. I could have reached 1 million followers a long time ago. But I have principles, I have a conscience, and there are stories that I just will not cover. It doesn't matter if they're trending, it doesn't matter if you get a lot of views, I will not do it. Because behind every public personality is a human being, and there's family and family members, they all hurt. Maybe these big publications should put that into consideration, because you have the blood on your hands of Jason Arday. Do not forget to like, to subscribe, hit the notification button, and I will see you sooner than later. All of my love to the Arday family.
Just woke up to the news that Dr. Jason Arday has been found dead, and I'm so furious and so disgusted that I haven't even got out of the bed to brush my teeth before I make this video. So, morning breath and all, you're getting this rant. The British press and every racist cretin who wrote a think piece on this man had blood on their hands. They hounded him to his grave. For those of you who don't know the story, short story short, Professor Jason Arday was a neurodivergent professor who was basically hired by Cambridge University, which is one of our top universities, colleges, as you will, Americans, in the country. He was accused of plagiarism and exaggerating his achievements. This whole witch hunt was started by a white professor who was fired for open racism and basically saying that black people do not belong in academia, and was casting aspersions on Dr. Arday. Now, whether he committed these sins or not, the man resigned. I believe over 250 articles were written about him. He was hounded online. His family were hounded. For what exactly? Bear in mind, there are white professors who have been accused of exactly the same thing and nowhere near the amount of scrutiny. In fact, there was a whole rape scandal going on where white professors were raping students. Nowhere near the same amount of scrutiny. And we know the fuck why. They use that man as just another beating stick to talk about why black people do not belong in academia and DEI. That's all they used it for, and this man was just collateral in their fight for white supremacy. That poor soul was treated worse than any murderer, rapist, child molester has ever been treated in England. And quite frankly, I'm so fucking disgusted by the whole thing. I don't even know what to say. But I'm not surprised. Let's be honest. I'm not surprised. These dinosaurs are so terrified that they are going into extinction, that they are jumping on any reason to destroy any black person that happens to buck the trend of their beliefs and prejudices. So we just have to keep fighting, people. Rest in peace, Dr. Jason Arday. And yeah, fuck me.
Stop scrolling, stop what you're doing and pay attention, because I spoke about this story a few days ago, and since then I have been thinking about Jason Arday, his rise, the controversy that engulfed him, and ultimately his tragic death. There is no doubt he had questions to answer, no doubt. There were serious allegations of plagiarism and questions about his academic work, as well as parts of his life story that helped to propel him into the public spotlight. As a journalist, I'm going to be the first to say those questions were legitimate. But here's what concerns me and what I've been trying to figure out. When did scrutiny become a blood sport? Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being simply about his academic record, his intelligence, his disability, his childhood, his achievements, his entire life story was suddenly put on trial. And that's where I think we need to have a much more difficult conversation, because accountability matters, right? However, the press coverage became a public dismantling of this man, of who he was. His PhD wasn't enough. His career wasn't enough. His childhood was examined. His disability story of autism and global development disorder were questioned. His achievements were picked apart. His credibility was shredded in public, and day after day, the pile-on grew. So when Black people say that they are angry about what happened, they have every right to be. And I don't suspect some of the right-wing pundits and sections of the media talking about Jason Arday will ever fully understand why this runs so deep. Because for many of us, this isn't simply about one man, it's about a pattern that we've seen before. Black man reaches one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. He becomes Cambridge's youngest Black professor. His story is celebrated across the pond and even here. Then serious questions emerge about his academic record. Fine, investigate them. If he plagiarized or embellished his resume, establish the facts. If Cambridge failed in its vetting, ask Cambridge some damn questions too. But what many of Jason's friends and loved ones witnessed wasn't simply scrutiny of an academic record. They watched his very right to have reached Cambridge in the first place put on trial. And that is where this becomes bigger than plagiarism, okay? Because some of the commentary around Jason appeared to fit perfectly into an existing political narrative that diversity has gone too far, that standards have been lowered, that Black people are being handed positions they haven't earned, that somehow Jason's controversy proves something about diversity itself. Sound familiar, Trump administration? But it didn't. If one person did something wrong, then investigate that person. But don't put an entire generation of Black academics in the same position with Jason Arday in the same file. And here's another thing. Where's the intense scrutiny on the institution itself? Don't forget that Cambridge hired him. Cambridge examined his credentials. Cambridge appointed him. Cambridge put his name behind him, put their name behind him. So if Jason's record contained problems serious enough to justify this level of outrage, then surely somebody should be asking, how did one of the world's greatest universities miss it? That's why so many are angry, because they have watched institutions celebrate Black excellence when it is convenient, but when controversy arises, suddenly the individual can find themselves standing very much alone. And now Jason Arday is dead. He leaves behind a wife and 2 children, young children. His family says that they watched his life collapse in real time, blaming what they describe as a campaign of harassment by sections of the media. And now the headlines will fade. The cameras will disappear. The right-wing commentators will find somebody else to talk about. Social media will find somebody else to tear apart. And everybody will move on to the next scandal as though there wasn't a human being underneath all of this. Maybe that is the lesson Jason's death should force us to confront. Because somewhere along the way, we have created a culture that doesn't just want people held accountable anymore. We want humiliation. We want the downfall. We want the viral clip. Jason Arday had questions to answer, but he isn't here anymore. So perhaps now the questions belong to us. When did we become so comfortable with publicly destroying people? And when the hashtag stop trending, the outrage merchants find their next target, who takes responsibility for the lives that have been ruined? Because this is no longer just about Jason Arday. It's about us. It's about the culture we have created, a culture that builds people up and waits for them to fall. But maybe the ugliest part isn't that people fall. It's how much we seem to enjoy watching them hit the ground.
Jason Arday lied about his credentials. Trump is a paedophile. Boris Johnson had wine and cheese parties in the middle of a global pandemic. You lie about being 6 foot on dating apps. Like, the level of outrage that people have over Jason Arday potentially fabricating some of his resume is completely disproportional compared to how other white men are treated and get away with much, much worse with hard evidence. And if you can't show even any level of empathy for a man that just took his own life and his family who are having to deal with the aftermath of that, it says more about you than it does him. It's not even relevant. This man was hounded by the press, by online trolls. He experienced disgusting racism all in the last few days of his life. And you're talking about some lies that he could have told. Who gives a fuck? This is a human life. A human life was lost. Not because he lied, not because he exaggerated, but because people are disgustingly racist and love to take down a black man. That is the story here.
Why is this professor at one of the UK's most prestigious universities giving up his post? Professor Jason Arday was Cambridge's youngest ever black professor when he joined in 2023. But he's been caught up in a row after allegations of plagiarism, which is essentially when someone steals someone else's work, and questions over some of his stated achievements, such as his marathon claims. He insisted he isn't a liar and that he's faced an unrelenting level of public scrutiny and personal attack. He said some errors in his early academic work were because of his autism, and he also told the Times there had been a coordinated campaign to unseat him, which he argued was racially motivated. The allegations came from another academic, Nathan Kofnes, who was sacked from his Cambridge role in 2024 after a backlash to his views on black people. Last night, Cambridge University said it had launched a probe into Professor Arday. Hours later, he announced he was quitting. Some say the claims of plagiarism are legitimate, while others argue his treatment has been motivated by racism.
I'm so angry right now, I'm shaking. I just heard from MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, who is the MP of Jason Arday and his family. And she's just informed me that the British media are harassing Jason Arday's grieving family. They're hounding them at home, reporting from outside their home. They've actually reported the road of his house, and they're hounding family members for comments? Like, have they not done enough? Are these people mad? Jason Arday has children. What the actual hell? Are you trying to kill his children like you killed their father? Are you people mad? Have you no compassion? What the actual hell? Have you not done enough? You hounded and smeared Jason Arday to death, and now you're doing to his family? Get the fuck away from Jason Arday's family. Get the fuck away from Jason Arday's home. Get the fuck away from Jason Arday's children now. How freaking dare you? Are you mad? I want the names of the bloody journalists, the photographers, whatever freaking TV or radio station that's participating in this monstrosity. I swear to God, we are not mad enough. Get the fuck away from them now.
At times it felt like a full-blown witch hunt and moral panic. Now you might say, well, in this case there was witchery there because he did commit mistakes and maybe there was plagiarism. Fine. There are loads of examples of academics that have committed plagiarism. Day after day of endless newspaper coverage of finding any student who had ever received a bad tutorial from this guy or some bad lecture notes literally being used by the Times newspaper, in one case, as paid-for ads to get people to click and subscribe to Times, dredging up any anonymous student that they might have been able to find who once had a bad experience with the guy. And crucially, were doing so after the point at which he resigned, at which point one has to ask, what was there more to say about this story? Not on the institutional side. By all means, do reporting about Cambridge and his appointment and all of that. But was it really necessary to, after the point of resignation, hound the guy? I mean, you know, when we were talking about it last week, John, when we were thinking about who are going to cover this, one of the senior producers on the show said, he's going to kill himself, isn't he? Everyone could see where this was going. And although we've got to be careful about suicide and talking about the motivations of suicide, of course we must. It is clear, it would seem impossible to the point of absurdity not to believe that the way he was treated, basically as a sort of public enemy number one in the press, likely did not contribute to where he ended up.
Was the public interested in the story? Yes. What was the public interest? And I think those are two different questions that you need to answer. And as you say, Lewis, surely there was a point where he resigned, they'd got their guy. I mean, you said it was a sort of moral panic. It felt to me like a blood sport. You're chasing after. We didn't kill him. I mean, he jumped over the edge of a cliff.
Well, I was thinking about using the word lynching.
Well, it was a lynch. You can have a lynching without a rope on which someone is hung. It felt like that sort of, we're chasing, we're chasing after you, we're getting closer, we've got you. Right. It doesn't stop, though, when they've got him and he said, OK, I resign. It carried on after that. Arday's great misfortune was for this to come at the start of the silly season for journalism. That period where it is the dog days and there's not much happening and the politicians are away on holiday and you're desperately trying to fill your newspaper or your airwaves with stories of something. And the Jason Arday story fell sweetly into that particular kind of miasma. And what it's done is it carried on and on and on and on. And it's a silly season story that has now cost a life.
You could change the world in any way. How would you change it?
I would take a thread and a needle and I'd interweave love into our society. That's what I would do. I think the absence of love in our society is absolutely palpable. I feel like the empathy we have for one another, the tolerance that we have for one another, it's completely eroded, you know, and there is so much anger in society. There's so much anger in society, and I often think, what would one replace that with? Because also, that anger's become inflicted. You know, we're not kind of driven towards one goal, we're kind of turning on one another. And so for me, the thing that I would do, if I could change the world, I would have the world, and I'd have it spinning on this axis of love. That's what I'd have. Because we've lost, as a society, in my humble opinion, I think we've lost our way. And I think the last 15 years, or the last 13 years for sure, particularly in British society, has been a huge enabler of that. You know, and I think the essence of love might seem like a very underrated thing, or a very melancholic thing, but it's really important, because if I said to you, provide me examples of where you see that in our daily society, you know, if I turn on the news, apart from the kind of fun item that comes on at the end, at the moment there's so much kind of pulling us apart, and very rarely do I hear people talk about what the things we could do to bring one another together.